talking all things related to customer experience and market research. Now, customer experience can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and often it is up to CX professionals like our guest on today's episode to help support businesses in measuring and improving their customer experience. So before we dive in, my name is Sharday Torgerson, and I'm the creative and digital strategist at Insightrix Research in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And this is Season 3, and I'm your host for it. Stories of Market Research, the Insightrix podcast. So I'm really excited. This is the first time we're doing video podcasts. I'm really excited to have our guest on today's episode, Ken Peterson. Now, Ken Peterson has more than 2 decades of experience in marketing research, retail, technology, hospitality, and transportation. And now he's living his best island life in Hawaii, leading the CX division in QuestionPro. Leading the CX division in Hawaii, Ken, that sounds like a fantastic way to balance work and home life. Please tell our listeners more about you, your background, and maybe your role at QuestionPro.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in. You said 2 decades, and I realized I'm approaching that quarter century mark actually now, and it's like wow, which is interesting because I was going to be in this for 2 years. Was my original goal. I had a prior world. I worked for a retailer. I did operations. I did all the stuff that no one likes to hear, that had no emotion attached to it. It was all, look at the numbers and tell us what the sales forecast is, predict the inventory levels. I had formulas. I had worksheets that fed into it. So I can't believe that it was almost a quarter century ago. A friend of mine said, hey, I got this little project and I really need your help on it. It's an operational project within market research. And it turned into just a career that I've absolutely loved. I really did. I started with building out a reporting mechanism. This is back in the late 90s when online reporting wasn't a big thing in market research. And we put up an online reporting portal. And, from there, it turned into, I just really enjoyed what I was doing. So got acquired by Ipsos a couple of years later. And I went from, this 2-year project to becoming the chief operating officer of Ipsos, managing all the technology partnerships, which includes all the big names out there. I mean, in the space that, we all know and all have their great platforms out there, such as Medallia, such as Qualtrics, InMoment, Allegiance, which became Merit CX, which is now part of InMoment. And another one that I worked with was a small company called QuestionPro. And that's, fast forward 14 years, who would have known I would have been leading the CX division of QuestionPro at the time. But I've really enjoyed it since I've joined.
I find that common in market research where folks will just find a passion project and then they almost never leave. I think that's a really cool way to get into the field often, because I swear nobody lands in market research on purpose. And you end up getting a group of folks that you work with coming from all different walks of life and maybe different backgrounds as well. And it adds to the whole nuance of it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, my kids growing up got to see me travel all these places all around the world. Not one of them ever said, "Gee, when I grow up, I want to be a market researcher."
It's true. And honestly, you hear it all the time, but it's so cool. Even, whom I work with, there's actually quite a few young researchers as well. And a lot of the stories are, that they never really imagined going into it, but they can't really see them not being in it as well. Now that they're actually a few years in. So really neat. It's kind of cool to hear your side as well. Maybe dive in a little bit more about QuestionPro CX and how, you got involved on the software side.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of goes back, as I mentioned, in my role in Ipsos, I was managing all these vendors, and I had lots of great ideas on, how we can improve, what we can do to make the software better. And, I worked with a lot of these platform companies already, and some of the ideas that you see, I can't take full credit for them, but some of the ideas were coming out of the conversations we were having and our client needs. And, QuestionPro really pulled me because I think they probably, just out of the box survey tool is probably the best one I'd seen across the board in terms of being able to be self-service, as well as how technical you could get with it, the logical you could get with it. So it was in depth and user friendly. I mean, two things that usually don't go hand in hand. So, naturally, I had been drawn to it, and I'd worked with Vivek over the years, talked and consulted, and we worked back and forth on things and just as friends. And I was actually going to retire, and he says, I really want you to come in and make the customer experience tool, come to life. And so, what appeals to me in this, in the QuestionPro platform is we manage all of it. We have market research tools, we have employee experience tools, we even have communities platform, which is unique. I mean, you can look at all those platforms that have, oh, well, we can do customer and employee surveys. Well, yeah, they're just surveys, but we actually have workflows that are dedicated to these. So when you go in there, it's actually a separate system within the same platform, but a separate system that says, hey, this is how we handle employee surveys, and this is how we handle customer experience surveys, because you can't lump them all in as the same type of survey and say, oh, well, we can expect the same results just by using the same survey tool.
So I've had the opportunity to read some of your articles on QuestionPro blog. I wanted to go into an article you wrote, okay? So by the way, you're a really good writer, absolutely great info on customer experience. As someone who even writes to market research, I find a lot of the times it's actually really hard to come up with good analogies or good stories, even in terms of, how people are actually using market research, even further customer experience programs to actually inform further. So you had a story on your blog called The Tale of Two Garbage Cans. And I really enjoyed this analysis on how service-based organizations can provide a good customer service. We often too work with government as a service-based organization. And I think it's a really good topic to actually speak on, because so often I think this is the type of area in CX that I think a lot of people wanted to learn more about, but don't know how to get about it. So, I'm kind of wondering why these types of touch points are so important to successful CX, and maybe how service-based organizations can recognize that a good CX can come from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, what people forget oftentimes, even in our own world of CX, is that everything is a touch point. I mean, every conversation, every transaction, if you have a piece of mail that you get from, I mean, from the tax division, and it's sitting there, every time you look at it, that's a touch point. Even if you haven't touched it, you looked at it and you thought about it. So CX is really, if you think about it in that level, I mean, it's everywhere. And oftentimes, government is the one accused of. I mean, we all have these stories of being at the DMV for hours. I could even cite some of my own stories, and the one with the tale of the two garbage cans was really about, there was no obligation. It's sort of like the returning the cart at the grocery store kind of story. It's like there's no penalty for you not doing it, but it's still the right thing to do. And really, that was what that story was about. I mean, we have this rotating schedule that if you mix it up, you're not getting your garbage picked up that week. And so, it was just really a situation where, it's a couple that's across the street, they're retired, and they put out the wrong one. And I was sitting there talking on the phone. The guy, there was no one around to see, but he recognized that, hey, they just put out the wrong garbage can. So what did he do is he got out, he put the one back, brought the one out, dumped it, and even put that one back so they wouldn't have to come out and return it and, realize that they even made a mistake or anything like that. I probably would have been panicked and said, gee, I didn't even put out any garbage can. And it was just one of those moments when you look at it and you go, he just did the right thing. And that's really what customer experience should be about, is just doing the right thing, not because the score goes up, not because I get fewer tickets on a closed loop feedback system. It's treating the customer the right way.
I love that. And, I think so often we forget that front-facing staff is a huge, huge part and to the success of a customer experience program or a customer experience at all. So, even in his position, often he may assume he's just doing his job, but, at the end of the day, that's your front-facing staff really delivering the extra mile for you. And that does translate through. So often, yeah, even as a business, we try to tell our clients, really pay attention to your front, or what your front staff have to say, because even, they might have certain pain points that you can work into these touch points that make a better experience for everyone. So
And even the employee that has no incentive to, and he might have even been disincented to take that extra
yep.
minute to do that. He still did what was right, and that's what we should pay attention to. It's really good for every brand, whether we're talking government or a retail store or a technology software provider company. Doing what's right even when no one's looking.
No, I
Essentially.
like that. What we talked about, the whole idea about customer touch points kind of changing this aspect that it's no longer linear. You don't have a customer just going to a store, buying or doing some product research on the spot, maybe asking a salesperson, buying it. You have all these middle points now that even include, digital touch points that included, to your point, just client or, sorry, excuse me, front-facing staff touch points that often aren't even recognized. Knowing that, there seems to be with businesses a need to create a more centralized opportunity to democratize their data. This is across systems, this is across technologies, and the whole idea is to really provide a much more consistent customer experience. Now, I'm curious because even as a marketer, this is something that truly interests me. This is something that as a business we even look at, even though we're a market research firm. What are some applications that businesses can use to understand their CX ecosystem better, try to gain that full spectrum view, and in a particularly useful way for businesses that might not be either data savvy or too, into the market research industry?
Well, that's sort of, that's probably why I'm still employed. First of all, is that challenge. You mentioned it. I mean, the touch points aren't
Yeah.
linear anymore, and they're everywhere. And you want to know about it. At the same time, I remember when I first got into the space, every time we'd field a survey, it would go from, hey, we're intending 5 questions to now it's up to 50. Like, because we have the customer on the, and so there's a lot to think about when you think about the ecosystem. And I always say it's great to be able to get feedback on every touch point, but it's impossible, especially when every touch point is going to say, well, I need 50 questions, not
Yeah.
5. And so it's really finding those places where it matters. Having an intercept on your website so that if they want to give feedback, they can. Don't give them a pop-up. I hate
Oh, yes.
You can give them an exit survey, but if I'm in the middle of reading and something pops up, whether it's an advertisement for, hey, subscribe to our magazine or something, that's the first indicator that I'm going to go to that X and
Yeah.
close that screen. But having a feedback tab on the side where someone can, in a bank is easily just, hey, I was trying to find something about boat loans, but, I don't see anything on your page. And you can take them through that and get that feedback. So not only can you direct them to the right place while you're in the moment, but also find out that, hey, we have a lot of people making inquiries about this and we can adjust the experience accordingly because, hey, for whatever reason, a bunch of people in Hawaii want boat loans.
Mhm.
So we can, let's make sure we highlight that on our page. And then it goes to the other, what I call the facing touch points where you're actually talking to someone, or you're interacting with someone. And that could be a chat online, being able to get quick feedback like that. And it's tough because, when you're talking to someone over the phone, you're a little hesitant to say, well, this person did a bad job. I worked with, call centers over the years, and, listening to phone recordings, everyone said, oh, I don't want to say they did a bad job. They were helpful. But you need to be able to get that feedback. And so, the applications, we've not really evolved them much, but it really, you can really bring in a lot more data to those applications and enhance them and say, let's shorten the surveys. Let's make it quick feedback instead of, 50 questions. It's one of those goals that we had with NPS Plus was like, originally NPS was, hey, 1 question, 1 open end, but people weren't happy with that because you couldn't get all those drivers analysis and root
Mhm.
cause and So we added the root cause issue in there, and our clients love it because now it's one question, one more click, and an open end, and you're getting a lot more feedback than you ever got. We got the root cause, and we got a churn risk variable associated with it. So you can do that across many more places, but there's other places that we've really got to open up I say the data doors to each other. And, a lot of these companies work in silos. So, hey, the website isn't sharing data about who they're capturing leads on the website with the people that are doing sales and the people that are doing service. And that really causes a problem. So being able to bring those, bring that data together in a singular application, like we've tried to do with QuestionPro, across employee, across customer, even across market research, and leveraging our tools like the Insights desk to bring that all together in one place that's searchable. I mean, that's really a driving force on how you can become strategic instead of tactical in approaching things, and look at the company overall, and remember that every experience, even an anonymous market research survey, still puts something in the brain of a customer to think
Yeah,
about.
that's a good point. I couldn't agree more that a lot of these organizations tend to work in silos, and that's why it's super important to connect with folks like QuestionPro to really take a lot of these data channels and really plug them in together. I mean, even myself, I find often from a marketing perspective that the data utilized in house, we're always looking for different ways to apply it elsewhere, but even then we recognize our own gaps within our business, and how do we handle that. And we're an insights provider ourselves, so it's a really interesting nuance, because we have too our own customer journey, while at the same time we're helping others figure theirs out. So it's a cool concept, knowing that we kind of are in a era where a lot of folks will argue that data is the new oil. I swear that's the new concept, but in all retrospect, I think it's because people say that because it's so untapped. And I think we're at a point in time where, you have businesses like QuestionPro are really figuring out how to supply and support businesses who, have all these great data, or have all this great data on their table. They just do not know how to maybe put it together in a way where, even their marketer may understand, or their front-facing staff who might need to know a little bit more, just so that they can kind of do their job better. So it's a really good point.
And one of my colleagues had one of the best comments about data a few years ago. He said, data is like manure. If you just put a big pile of it together, it just stinks and attracts flies.
Oh man.
He says, but if you spread it around right, distribute it the way it's supposed to be distributed, it will actually grow a garden, and it will yield fruit for you. And it was like, it was very Scottish of him. My colleague Steve Livingstone, I'll call him out on it, but he said it right in front of an audience of 250 people, and he says, "Oh, I just made that up," and I'm like, it's stuck with me since then.
So true.
It's
wow.
true.
No, and you're speaking to a farming community here in Saskatchewan. So if that doesn't ring any truer here, then I don't know what would. But no, it's a really good point. It's so hard to manage a pile of data to some degree, and often it works against people. And I think a lot of the times it's really hard to manage. And it's good to start exploring ways to really, for lack of a better term, spread that out. So, but no, really funny stuff there. But I want to kind of go back into maybe some of your writing as well. Again, I had a really great time on the QuestionPro blog. Lots of good information there. I came across one article too where this is kind of what we were talking about a little bit, just the idea that maybe there's a little bit of a slight disconnect between, what CX researchers can do, and then further the client expectations as a result. So in your experience, do you find maybe there are causes that create that type of disconnect? And, what kind of advice would you give to either CX researchers or researchers alike to what can they do to fill that gap maybe?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that data discussion. I mean, a big chunk is it's what I mentioned before. A CX program will not improve the customer experience.
Yeah.
It won't. it's a culture that will improve the customer experience. And it's just true in every element of market research. Running an ad study will not make the ad better. You have to make a change after the fact to make the ad better. Running an employee experience study will not make the employee experience better. In fact, if you don't do anything, it will probably make it worse. And CX is very much like that. And I used to say, I used to use the analogy, like, you can put a thermometer out there, but that's not going to change the temperature. So the other, there's almost always that big sigh of relief when you launch a big program. A CX program is a big program. It impacts a lot of different channels and departments. But getting that launched is not the success. The success comes when you make the first change as a result. And that there needs to be an ongoing evaluation of what you're measuring, what you're doing. And that doesn't always mean, hey, I'm going to add another question and I'm going to add another question. It's really about actually seeing what you can eliminate from the question side and what you can enhance by making even the survey experience, which is part of the customer experience, better. I can't emphasize enough. It doesn't end when you launch that study. It never ends. There's a site, it's called despair.com, and they have these demotivational posters, they're called. And one of my favorites is, the march for quality is never ending. So it's not like a marathon. It's more like a death march. So, you're going to, if you want this to work, it's going to be a never ending, let's keep going. Let's have the same enthusiasm at year 7 as we had at year 1 when we
absolutely launched. It becomes a bit of a tracker to some degree in that aspect. Even ourselves, we've been working, with the same client for even well over a decade on their customer experience research projects. And, it's more than just one single survey being sent out. There's lots of different types of methodologies. We have even things like our corporate reputation index that runs every month and stuff. And folks, even in Saskatchewan, it's a big deal for us because a lot of our larger brands tend to compete. So it's really easy to put a corporate reputation index together and start to learn about our own marketplace to some degree. So it's really cool. And there's a lot of ways to kind of go about that as well. So it's interesting to hear, the sentiment that, once you get the program started, it doesn't stop. If anything, that's when the real work begins to some degree. So
exactly.
Yeah. So, jumping right back into that whole concept, you'll hear things like use voice of customer, and that term is widely used in market research. I'm sure you guys, discuss it every single day. It's part of CX to some degree. With 90% of companies already using some sort of CX to compete with one another, how do businesses maybe avoid falling behind their competitors? And maybe, how can they use VOC or voice of the customer to maybe propel that ahead?
Yeah, I think, we're all using some sort of technology in one way, shape, or form. I'd be stunned if I heard of any Fortune 1000 company that isn't measuring the voice of the customer or CX in one way, shape, or form. I think the way to, so that puts them all on a level playing field, regardless. Regardless of which provider you're using, I have a better text analysis tool or anything like that. Really, I think the human connection is what's going to differentiate. And I even wrote about that in one of my blog pieces. Like, we are at a place, and in some ways good, where self-checkout reigns now. It's, hey, I can get this done quicker. I don't have to have anyone breathing on me. I can wear my mask, go in the store, get everything done, and go through that self-checkout and not have to have someone else handling all my groceries and all that. But there's still, when it comes to customer experience, there has to be a human element to it, especially when they need someone. Nothing more frustrating at the self-checkout when something doesn't ring up and there's no one there to say, hey, can I help you with that? I see you're having a problem. There's nothing more frustrating when you call a call center and you end up with a 20-minute, let's dial through the numbers to get to the right menu kind of thing. Like, there should be, a human element that, and there's AI that's smart enough to figure this out, that, hey, it's not even AI. It's like, hey, this person's been on a menu for about a minute now. Let's maybe like get a human intervention in there, so we can stop them from going through. And, a lot of times what people fail to realize in that is that adding that human element isn't adding costs. It's actually creating efficiency. And I think that's one of those things when companies stop looking at everything as, coming from an operations person, I know sounds strange, but when they stop looking at everything as a, just a P&L item, and realize the contribution that your customers bring to the company, your employees bring to the company, and bringing it all together, really is what's going to make companies succeed. Where you get, I call it almost a religious following. If you look at Apple products, for example, I mean, there will be people that will wait in line, not ever having seen the product, just to get it. And I remember when the iPad first came out, I had a friend that was going to wait. I think he waited 24 hours in a line to be one of the first ones to get it. And they hadn't shown pictures or anything. He just knew it was coming out. And I said, well, why? And he says, it's Apple. I know it's going to be good. And when you have that kind of following and that kind of, faith in it, you've really succeeded from a customer experience standpoint.
Yep, I agree. And I've even noticed through the pandemic, in my experience, that there are some of those types of touch points that I think have been directly affected by the pandemic and probably most likely improved. So we have a rather massive chain store here, much like it exists everywhere else. But I found that since the start of the beginning of the pandemic to the end, they completely changed their self-checkout method to actually being a lot more humanized. And it's a lot more efficient to the point where I actually used to be very, I don't like to have to go through self-checkout. I like to actually engage with people and have a conversation and that type of thing. And then I recognized the efficiency in this new way that they were doing it. And I find myself actually using their checkout a lot more. So, I mean, it went from being such a painful experience because it was newer and maybe recently implemented for them, but you could tell that, and it might have been pandemic induced to some degree, but I was really thankful that, to your point, I could still actually speak to somebody if I needed to. And it went from, the screen kind of telling you, oh, hey, do you need assistance, to someone actually coming up and saying, hey, how may I help you? So big difference.
Yeah. And you see the difference even, it used to be, if you had 6 self-checkouts, it was one person manning it. Now it's 2 people. It's 2 people going around. Some of it is, hey, we're cleaning the screens after the touch screens after each use, things like that. But, having that option, and even having the option to not be in self-checkout and not be waiting in line for hours. Like, I don't want to jump into sometimes you just grab stuff and you don't feel confident. Like, hey, I have, 50 items. I don't want to jump through a self-checkout. But then you sort of cringe because you go, oh, I'm going to stand in line behind 20 people until I can get to see that one cashier. And so, it's human element, not just when you're using the technology, but having the option for the human element first outside of the technology.
I like that. That totally makes sense. And it helps then still give the choice to the consumer, which allows them to be comfortable with how then they may purchase with you in the future. Because I, like myself, know that there's much more competition than said stores. So if I'm not necessarily enjoying my experience anymore, I can find another place to shop. So it's great that there is a response to that. And like I said, maybe the pandemic kind of propelled a little bit in terms of even digital transformation. A lot of businesses are really figuring out how to, go online and be a little bit more efficient that way. I think it's just, it's kind of been brought on that way. But, we were on the topic, we might as well continue on it. You mentioned the idea about, the human side of research. So, and how it's important to the technology used. The whole aspect about AI sentiment and not maybe quite understanding some of the human elements like empathy, right? In your experience, how does maybe empathy play a role in CX research on the human side, but maybe also on the digital application side?
Yeah, and I think that quick tidbit about my prior career is a perfect example, because I was behind the scenes running spreadsheets and saying, this is how many people should be staffed at the store at this time. It had nothing to do, it was all, this is the sales forecast, this is the expected volume, this is expected customer count. And it was all taking those things and just making models and planning models based on numbers. And, one of the things that, I think the reason I grabbed onto customer experience research so fervently when I joined was that there was a human element that I was just completely unaware of. Mostly because I was in a back room in an office surrounded by four walls with no one to talk to all day and just working on models. You forget that there's humans associated with it. And so part of that is, like, think of someone has a rush order for a party. Hey, I just got hooked in last minute to bring 30 desserts. And so that messes up that messes up your inventory plan. The person who's working two jobs, if you reduce their hours, they need those hours. And so just saying, hey, I'm going to cut 4 hours off your shift because we don't need extra people. There's a human element to it. And that person, whether we like it or not, is going to look at it and go, well, maybe this job isn't the dependable thing that I need right now. Maybe that's not. And so on both sides of any experience research, whether it's the market research, employee, or customer research, we've got to remember that, there's a human side to it. So when we start measuring, and it's very tempting for us to even go all digital in our measurement. And it's like, it's the worst thing to do. It's still important to get out there and understand feelings and emotions. And, that's why there's companies out there that are saying, hey, we're going to capture video. We're one of them, because you want to capture video. You want to see the expression. If I'm talking about, yeah, everything at my experience was fine, and I'm very straight-faced about it, that's not the same capture as, hey, everything in my experience was fine. And so, if I type it and I express it, there's two different expressions. And so I think that's the part when we moved sort of to digital research that we missed out on a lot. And same thing with digital commerce. We're missing out on the fact that, people like to browse. I'm as guilty as anyone of walking into a hardware store. Hey, I'm a dad of three. I walk into a hardware store, I could get lost for hours and lose a lot of money in the process, because I'm in there, I'm looking at things, yeah. I'm touching them, I'm picking them up, I'm looking at them and turning them around. And, even with the digital experience, it was one of those things that, many, many years ago when we were consulting with an electronics store, where we said, the thing that you miss out on the digital experience is that, not only are they beating you to the punch in shipping, your one advantage was that you could pick it up and you can look at the object. And, if you're going to go all digital, you're going to miss that, and you're going to lose to, an Amazon.com, for example.
Yeah, that's so true. And so much more we're experiencing businesses maybe going online, but then actually recognizing how important it is to keep brick and mortar to some degree. I even, some close friends of mine, vintage is quite a big thing these days, obviously, especially on eCommerce. I find a lot of Generation Z seems to be really getting into thrift shopping and, circular, recyclable, clothing. So, but nonetheless, I think it's interesting because I had a friend who was running a complete online store for many years and actually started to see the demand locally, and they moved their online shop to a brick and mortar. And 5 years ago, I don't even think they would have even ever considered it. So, the demand definitely outweighed the supply locally. And instead of maybe, doing all the extras that it takes to, ship out and hold your inventory and stuff, they decided, hey, this is a good move for us. So I thought that was kind of neat to actually see a digital company go from being completely online to now actually serving our community. So yeah. So that was a really good point on, again, the whole human side of research, even ourselves, like that is what we try to end up, really explaining to our clients a lot of the times when we're working with technology is we have, a group of researchers behind us that, we like to use the technology. We get really excited as well. So we're always looking for even new ways to use it or find different methodologies that that type of technology can really support our clients. So we're finding, right now, being a technology centric market research firm, that things are good for us, and we have a lot of opportunity to be exploring it. But even further, not to say against market research, but we also have tools like QuestionPro, where you don't actually have to work with a market research firm to be able to jump into CX, start to democratize your data, maybe start, looking into ways to build a CX program where, in the future, you might end up making some decisions based off of something that maybe your internal research team did. So even we often try to encourage our clients, like, research is still research. Research is good. You don't have to necessarily, call up a market research firm and go through a front to back research project to just start to collect some data. So, using technology, I think, is a pretty important one, but still recognizing that working with folks like us, we'll be able to, your point, we know the Saskatchewan marketplace quite well. We tell this to our clients a lot. And often when we work with clients who have a direct interest in our marketplace, we can really take the research and add in the actionable insights that go a lot past the data, both by our experience in knowing our marketplace, but being able to bring in those nuances as well from the human side, I think, is pretty important. So on that, we're kind of done here. So I figure, there's a great conversation. If you had anything else you wanted to share, maybe about QuestionPro, what you guys are up to, how the CX software, maybe has some feature updates coming up, feel free to, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like I said before, I mean, CX at QuestionPro is a little different than your typical technology provider, because we actually believe in that service element, that human element. Instead of, like you said, I mean, it's great to have something where you can get in there and I can do a quick one-off survey by myself and not. But we also believe that for something this important, it takes that full team to sort of support you, and we believe that at QuestionPro. So we're not handing you off and saying, here's the keys to your car. Now figure out
yeah,
how to roll down the
you
windows.
figure it out.
We're gonna help you roll down the windows. We're gonna help you set the mirrors. We're gonna get it all set up, and what I like to say, and all of this, usually for a lower price than what some of the main technology providers are providing. So that's a great thing. And so I heard one technology firm, their proclaim was, hey, we'll run your entire business from our CX platform. I'm not going to lie to you and say we can do that. It won't make your morning coffee like this said. But what we find is, it's nicely packaged. It's robust. You're not just looking at CX. It's that thing that people are looking for. Can I get all my research in one place? Well, yes, you can. So some of the big things that we've been putting together. Most recently, Dan Fleetwood announced Insights Desk, which is all about being able to make that research searchable, even if it's not QuestionPro research. Being able to have a catalog of it. And then I think the other part, specific to customer experiences, we've been testing it with a few of our select clients, but we're about to roll out what's called Outer Loop, which is tied to our NPS Plus. So not just taking those little tactical changes, one off, hey, someone complains, let's give them a coupon and make them happy. How do we fix the problem that keeps coming up over and over again, especially if it's related to a policy or procedure that we have in place? So that's been something I've been working on all summer. And while most people were looking at their first vacations in a year, I was really enjoying the fact that I spent my week of vacation nestled in a camping retreat away from all technology, so I could open my laptop and work on my outer loop tools for closed loop.
That's awesome. You can do it from anywhere. CX can happen anywhere, right?
Anyway. Even in the middle of the woods with no service.
That's, again, you're speaking to the right audience. So we are probably 90% rural residents in Saskatchewan. So it's definitely a pain point around here. But if I may, land on one final note, you kind of brought up this whole idea about technology really being a partnership to some degree. And I really like this whole aspect about even Insightrix. So we tend to, when we work with clients, it's very, very often that we work with them once. In fact, fact, we have a majority of our clients are returning customers for the simple fact that, once they do a project, it's usually because they want to build on it more. They want to build on those insights. Maybe they're doing a tracker every year to some degree. And the technology that we use is really often just it's a partnership. And even ourselves, we've been working with certain technology providers that we don't look at as our white label solution by any means. In fact, we kind of consider them an extension of our research team, because over the years they've even managed to change their platform to make sure that it's what we need to some degree. And a lot of the times we're just so impressed with how some of these technologies are willing to go the extra mile that way. So partnership is a big part of that, I think, when you're maybe a market research firm like us. And that's probably how we would work with folks like you. So thanks again for joining us today, Ken. I really appreciate it. We hope to have you on again, maybe in the new year here once we roll out into season 4. But thanks again, and we look forward to talking again.
Likewise. Aloha.